Hello everyone, Stuart here. For those of you that don't know who Robert Schleip is in our world, you've obviously been living in a cave. He is one of our leading fascial research scientists, and I had the pleasure of having an hour with him and talking all things fascial. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast video. We start off exploring his journey as a psychologist and then moving into structural body work as a Rolfer, and then how he made that transition over into fascial research. There's some absolute game changers in this interview. For those of you that dip your hands in fascia every day, you'll get some great insights here. He is a joyful character. You know, we're lucky enough to have him coming out to our shores into Sydney in October 2023. So if you're at all interested in that, there's plenty of links to follow and jump on board and be part of that magic that he brings. So as I always say, just be awesome at what you do, guys, and enjoy. Well, I've had a big day in clinic, so I'll finish for the day. You're just starting, so.
Okay, good.
Fantastic.
So, you are on the East Coast or in?
Yes, I am on the East Coast, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Where about, are you in Munich or?
In Munich, yeah. Very nice.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to come back to Australia. I used to be there a couple of times.
Yeah.
But that's 20 years ago. Yeah.
So, I know it's funny. I've had some colleagues who actually came and saw you last time you were out, actually. So there
there we go. Yeah.
They had a lot to say about it. They said it was a very rewarding experience, especially as clinicians.
Oh, nice to hear. Yeah.
So you're coming back to the shores?
I'm coming back to Sydney and Melbourne. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing Sydney and Melbourne. Terrific. Well, I'm in Melbourne.
Okay, so we should meet.
Well, indeed.
Because the huge low back pain congress.
Yes, I'm aware. I am aware of it. Yeah.
And that's big event. It all usually happens every 3 years.
Yep.
And so I think 12 years ago it was in Melbourne.
Yes, that would be correct. Yep.
Yeah. So that's a big event. Yeah.
It is a huge event. Yeah. It's a very popular one. There's no doubt about it. So yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So thanks so much for joining us. I obviously run a podcast series for clinicians here in Australia, and actually not just here in Australia, overseas as well. So probably a lot of UK.
Nice.
UK.
Good on you.
Yeah, thank you. Just pushing the message across. But so yeah, thank you for your time. Obviously I'd like to chat to you a little bit later on about when you come out here and what you're going to present, because that'll be fantastic. But the first thing I wanted to actually ask you is I wanted to know a little bit about your background, because I don't know much about your background. Honestly, most of what I've read is obviously research-wise and so forth. But how did it all start for you, Robert?
I studied psychology, and I wanted to.
Did you?
Become a psychotherapist at that time.
Yep.
But then at Heidelberg University for 5 years, but then at that time we were into Gestalt and primal scream. Yep. And that body work came as a way for self-transformation, not so much to fix mechanical problems.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into Rolfing at that time. So I became the first certified German Rolfer at a very young, maybe immature age.
How old were you?
I was 23, 24 when I trained in Boulder, Colorado to be at
the Rolf Institute.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. So that has been the longest basis of my life, to be with that fantastic working with my hands.
Yep.
With more than an hour for each client.
Yep.
And of course, and that was already a deep dive into fascia, but also how fascia is linked with personality and everything around it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously very, very different times back there in the understanding of fascia and the fascial system, wasn't it? I mean, it probably leads me to probably my first question, in regards to, like, what was your understanding of the fascial system back then to what it is now? Like, there's been some significant insights into it. There's no doubt about it. But if you think back to what you were taught about the fascial system back then to now.
Well, it was more nebulous.
Yep.
it was less concrete. It was some ghost that's omnipresent, and we Rolfers claimed it whenever we wanted to.
Yep.
And so it was omnipresent, but it also was hard to grasp, and it was mostly mechanical.
Yeah.
So posture and how movement fluency and posture, that was influenced. And I think that was a genius in mobility, how stiff you are.
Yeah, very much so. Especially as we age.
Yeah. So now we have this more, we have better measurement tools, and we have a bridge to the advantages and disadvantages of modern science.
We do, yes.
As a tool to learn more about the different functions of the fascial system. And that is different,
No, keep going. No, please keep going.
Yeah. So I've been working with fascia, or with my hands and with people using the Rolfing approach for several decades. I actually came to Australia in the 1990s as a Rolfing missionary.
Really?
To get Rolfing started. I didn't start it there. There were other people there, but I helped to get the first Rolfing training started in Australia.
That would have been was that Michael Stamborough? Was he involved then?
Michael Stamborough. Yeah, he was one of the earliest there.
Yeah, he was definitely a pioneer here in Australia, especially in that fascial world. Like I remember watching some of his DVDs. I mean, I've been practicing for 32 years, but he goes back further than that. And he was definitely a pioneer. There's no doubt about it, especially in that bodywork system situation. It was,
But that was a time when we just trusted our hands, and charisma was the main thing.
Yes,
in bodywork.
I love that, charisma.
Sure.
Big part of the clinical world. Absolutely.
For sure, it is. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, in that time, in that span, it's obviously working as a Rolfer, and then obviously into research and so forth. What was there a pivotal role, like a pivotal time for you that you swapped from being a clinician into the research of the fascial system, or did that?
I became a faculty member. At the Institute. So then you're part of the inner group that tries to define the mechanisms behind the work. And we had our doubts whether the teaching of Dr. Rolf, with all due respect, was really sufficient to explain these profound changes. It was actually in Adelaide, in Australia, that I did one of the first experiments to find out to what extent is the nervous system involved.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, because I was involved also in the Feldenkrais training. I did the whole 4-year Feldenkrais training. And there they say it's all in the brain.
Yes.
How you stand and how mobile you are is not in the gluing in the fascia, it's up there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to find out, and there was a story in the book of Milton Traeger. He's not
Traeger.
The founder of Traeger, very profound bodywork, and he described how, as a young doctor in a surgical room, he observed an old stiff man who was very restricted in his movement. You couldn't raise a straight leg up 90 degrees, and if he lied in a prone position, he had a kyphotic back. But when he was under anesthesia, and the brain let go of the control of the muscle tonus, he was as limber and loose as a young baby.
Wow.
And then he said, it's not in the fascia, it's all in the brain. And I needed to find out if he is right.
Yeah.
So in Adelaide, Feldenkrais' colleague, her husband was a surgeon. And he said at the breakfast table, Robert, I can arrange that for you. So I went.
Really?
Yeah. So I, with his permission and the permission of the patient, several patients who came for surgery I tested their mobility of the arm in elevation, but also of the ankle joint before anesthesia, general anesthesia, and after, to find out how big is control up here. And in two of the women, you couldn't drop the arm next to the ear to the table in supine position. And I used to think this is a fascial restriction, but under general anesthesia, it dropped all the way. So collagen cannot change in 10 minutes. Of course. So I knew the nervous system is frequently involved in long-term tissue restrictions. And that was a big start. So I started that debate. Then I started to work with people, with their permission, under anesthesia. I worked with fresh pieces of meat from the slaughterhouse, because then the nervous system is no longer there.
But so you're pulling it apart.
Yeah. And I became obsessed, wanting to know, to what degree is the nervous system involved, and to what degree are the mechanical stiffness properties of the fascia involved. And I started a big debate there.
That would have been a huge debate, wouldn't it? Given the old current concepts of gel and sol and that understanding.
But what I loved about the Rolfing community, a debate is tolerated.
Beautiful.
And in many of the bodywork, they say, "Oh, Robert, you are a beginner. Continue to practice, and one day you will understand."
Well, what would you know? You've only started your journey.
So, and then in that debate, I came across an article by a German phlebologist who had found sympathetic nerve endings in dense fascia. And at the same time, he found contractile cells with smooth muscle-like properties. So he suggested maybe the autonomic nervous system, and that was a new, is regulating fascial stiffness in the background, subconsciously, over long-term emotional pattern changes that you have. And I loved that, but I wanted to find out. And then I arranged a sabbatical year where I wanted to go into research. I thought I'd just interview scientists like you may be doing now and learn from it. But I didn't think I would be doing laboratory research myself. But that basically got me into the research field.
So that's where it started for you?
Yeah.
Right.
So I arranged a sabbatical year, and that was in the time. So I did like you, I interviewed scientists. And then I summarized it and tried to summarize it for my colleagues. So what can we body workers learn from these scientific laboratory specialists? And then due to my contacts, I became part of the organizing committee for the first International Fascia Research Congress, 2007 at Harvard Medical School.
I know, I do remember, and I remember it well. I didn't go, obviously, but I 100% remember that.
It was a big event. It changed a lot. Tom Myers was involved, Leon Chaitow was involved, my good friend Tom Findley was involved. And we were a very good team, but we also were very lucky that we made the application for government funding, which we got at the right time, when there are just a few publications coming out that were impossible to ignore, that fascia had much more functions in locomotion, etc., than anybody had assumed. And then I became so that conference was there was an atmosphere like in Woodstock, somebody wrote afterwards. And it was impossible afterwards to go back to my clinician life. So I extended my sabbatical year, and now I'm still here. And I love it. I love the research part.
It's funny. I actually just literally got off the phone with a colleague of mine who's in New South Wales, up Sydney way. And I said, I'm about to interview Robert Schleip, and he goes, "Oh, Can you please ask him about the autonomic nervous system and fascia for me in the smooth muscle cells? You literally led straight into it. So Andrew Corey, who will be watching this later, he'll be in heaven hearing that. Yeah, he's a big lover of the autonomic nervous system.
It's coming back system now. So that was the connection from the autonomic nervous system, which obviously is more linked with emotional parameters than the central nervous system already is. So that was a big inspiration for me. But then in the laboratory, I couldn't confirm it. So we confirmed over 10 years that fascia can contract. It can contract very, very slowly, 1 centimeter per month. So that is so that is not efficient for self-defense if you are attacked in martial arts, etc. But it can make a frozen shoulder so stiff that that a small surgeon woman needs help from an assistant to break it up after in surgical in surgery. So it can become very, very strong. So we showed fascia can contract. We found some substances, but none of those were hormones. So they were cytokines.
The cytokines.
This wound contraction. And but we couldn't confirm the hypothesis that it's linked with the autonomic nervous system and with stress hormones. And then later we found a link. And now this whole thing is opening up. It was found in the field of psychoneuroimmunology, not by us.
Really?
Because we found the missing link between chronic sympathetic stress activation and immune system changes in the lymph nodes. They were known functionally long before. So when you're under chronic stress, your immune system is very different.
Yes.
And they know exactly which T3 cells are activated and which ones are deactivated, but they didn't know the messenger molecule. You know, how does the autonomic nervous system, through which key, does it instruct the lymph nodes? And when they found it, it was a big surprise to us because the substance is called TGF-beta1, and that's a cytokine that we found as the most potent one to get fascia to contract in the slow manner. And now it's been even shown that if you stimulate the adrenaline receptors of fascial fibroblasts, then they produce more TGF-beta. They store it in the ground substance. And when there is a time of war, of mechanical stimulation or inflammatory changes, then they drink this miracle drink, TGF-beta, and then they become super contraction machines. Really? So now we have the link. Wow. And so you can see that after I almost gave up on this connection between fascial stiffness and emotional attitudes. So now I'm back in my field, you know, and I remember my contacts and the research methods that we used to apply when we were studying psychology at Heidelberg University.
Oh, wow. So you've come full circle then, almost.
Yeah.
So you started here and went around here and then ended up back here again.
Yeah. So after 40 years, you contact your own friends.
That's incredible. That is incredible. Yeah. Because I remember for a long time, the mechanoreceptors and learning, you know, all that hypothesis and so forth. And it's amazing how much we come full circle sometimes, isn't it? You know?
But you come back with a different attitude.
Because your understanding's different, isn't it? That's the thing. I mean,
so I can give you. No, you have.
No. Go on. No, please go on.
No, I can give you a concrete example. I got invited in the last year to participate in a study on major depressive disorder. So one of the leading scientists in Germany contacted me. He wants to see to what degree fascia is involved.
Really?
And to what degree a fascia-oriented stimulation may affect this very clinical pathology from a psychological and neurological perspective. So we used I think I have it here. We used our stiffness tool that we had developed. So this is the Endometer that our department.
Oh, right, yeah.
So rather than palpating the tissue with your fingers,
yeah,
and then you say your left trapezius is stronger than your right one.
Yep.
If you treat a violinist,
Yep.
and of course they trust you, but you cannot say whether it's 20% stiffer or 10% stiffer. So we developed this digital palpation finger. So it also indents, presses into the tissue 5 millimeters deep or 3 millimeters deep, and then tells you the resistance force.
So it gives you a gauge of the resistance and tone of
it gives
the
you
tissue.
Very exact tool on how stiff is the material you are testing. Wow. So they are using that in the industry to say how hard a rubber is or a piece of foam is.
Yeah. So
and we developed this. There were rudimentary tools before, but we put it into the electronic age here. And then we used that tool on the upper trapezius in normal patients and in depressive patients.
Right.
And we showed that they are stiffer, not only in the upper trapezius, but also in the mid-erector spinae back muscles.
Right. Isn't that funny? Because actually, just a side note here is I had a colleague actually contact me and ask me where they can actually get one of those, believe it or not. I don't know if they're available in Australia or...
They are now available. Yeah, you can order them internationally. They got a CE certification now. So we did our homework finally.
Okay, so you, at the end of the podcast at some stage when you're free, will send me a link for that for people if they want to...
Sure.
Can you do that? But... wow, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I find as a practitioner myself, when I'm working, especially thoracolumbar area, the erector spinae muscles, it's a highly source tone area.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I don't have the answers of why but I definitely see it. Obviously, I work with a lot of performance therapy with elite athletes and so forth, Robert. But I can guarantee you that junction there in itself, especially that erector spinae, especially if you were needling it or working or whatever, highly tonal, lot of feedback, a lot of resistance. So
one possible explanation why the thoracolumbar fascia may be more frequently affected by pathological changes or by emotional tension is we found a much higher amount of highly contractile connective tissue cells called myofibroblasts.
Really?
In human lumbar fascia as compared with other human fascia and also compared with animal lumbar fascia.
Is that right?
So some of the normal fibroblasts become myofibroblasts in order to make the tissue
stiffer and denser.
Yeah,
wow.
And you have that also in pathological stiffness changes, like in Dupuytren contracture, in the Viking's disease, or in frozen shoulder.
And we found
the same increase in myofibroblasts in the human lumbar dorsal fascia. So maybe that is a possible aspect.
How did you come across that, Robert?
Oh, that's years of work. So you take tissue pieces from body donors. And you go to the slaughterhouse early morning. So now it's 9 a.m. here. I would get up at 5 a.m. and as a vegetarian go to the slaughterhouse.
Really?
And get some animal fascia and compare it subsequently. So you learn how to do histology.
Wow.
Where you get it into cuts, where you get it in the microscope, where you stain certain elements. So I love the work because good science is when you don't know what you find.
Exactly. And that's it in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah. So and I had that. So I was sitting there and I didn't know whether it will contract, which tissue will have more contractile cells, and I loved it.
Wow. So you never, no grave robbing? Never digged up grave robbing? Never made your way to the cemetery?
I considered doing it. I considered doing it. Yeah. So I tell you a story.
Dr. Frankenstein?
Yeah, no, almost. Between you and me. There is an Austrian, he came into the Guinness Book of Records because he walked on his hands from Paris to Vienna in 6 weeks.
What?
And nobody else has been trying to beat that, which is rare in the Guinness Book of Records.
Yeah, because you put
the
challenge
record
out.
A few years later, somebody overdoes it. But he has been there since 30 years. Nobody beat him. And I considered, but only in my mind, to examine his fascia. You know, if he would have donated his body to fascia when he died, that would have been a big contribution, because most likely he had what you and I have as the IT band.
Yep, everywhere.
We don't have that when we are born. We create it when we do thousands of repeated steps with full body weight on it. So he had that on his arms for 6 weeks and probably longer. So probably for many weeks before he trained. So most likely he had a Brachoradialis tract. You know, and so I would love to get his grave with permission of whoever you would need to ask, and also see whether his IT band disappeared.
Yeah,
because that sometimes.
It's, you know, it's interesting because, I mean, obviously the body's an amazing machine, isn't it? And one thing that it does really well is it adapts to the environment you give it, isn't it?
Yeah, so I've never tweeted it. Maybe somebody in the audience, when you share this, has seen it. A rider's bone.
Yeah.
People, young men who are cowboys, who are sitting on horses for 10 hours a day and only walk a few steps in the evening. They frequently develop an ossification in the tendinous portion of the adductor magnus.
Oh, I love the adductor magnus. Don't start me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So similar like heel spurs are the plantar fascia more frequently than in other tissues. But of course, not when you are in a wheelchair. So you need to have frequent mechanical loading on it.
Yes. Right.
And so these cowboys develop the ossification in the adductor magnus.
At the attachment?
Yeah. So so if you look it up, rider's bone, it's a common and common anatomical technology. And I think similar the runner's knee, the densification at the IT band is a similar change. It's not a genetic so that you're born with it, you create it.
You adapt it.
Not in 3 days or 3 weeks, but over 3 months and further time of repeated loading.
Wow. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. There's no doubt about it. I mean, do you think, you know, like how much do you think fascia is a pain driver in musculoskeletal pain versus other tissues? Robert, do you?
Definitely, yeah. So pain, of course, is an experience created in the brain.
Yes.
A cadaver doesn't have pain. If I push on a piece of fascia that is not connected with a living sensing organism, there is no pain.
Yep.
So that is very important, yeah. But some pain is stimulated and fed by peripheral irritation. Not all pain, but a lot of pain cases. And now we have increasing indications, very robust indication, for example, low back pain.
Yes.
So we have shown that when you stimulate the lumbar-dorsal fascia, you get much more nociceptive spreading than when you stimulate the muscle tissue underneath.
Really?
And we also show that it has a very different pain description. So fascial low back pain feels different than muscular low back pain. That has been shown.
Yep.
And also now in sports medicine, delayed onset muscle soreness.
Yes.
So the soreness you have after heavy exercise, particularly after eccentric loading.
Yep.
My colleague, Jan Wilke, who I look forward to see again in 2 weeks when we meet again. He's now a big professor of a movement department in Austria. And he contributed to recognizing that in delayed onset muscle soreness, it is a swelling of the epimysial fascia, which is the fascial envelope on the outside.
Right.
And that is thicker, and that is sensitized. So next time you have delayed onset muscle soreness,
which I have now,
yourself, where is the source of the pain? Is it the skin? Is it the bone? Or is it any of the 3 or 4 layers, and which one in between?
Wow.
And now the research has shown it's mostly the thin fascial envelope on the outside of the muscle. That is swollen, and that is hypersensitive. So if you stimulate the epimysium with a small electrical impulse or with an injection of a small volume of hypertonic solution, then the patients say, "Aua." But if you go 2 millimeters deeper, they don't say "aua" when they have DOMs. So we know delayed onset soreness should be renamed delayed onset epimysial soreness or fascial soreness.
Does he? Has he got a research paper on that?
Oh yeah, several. Yeah.
Right. I might get you to send me.
So look up delayed onset muscle soreness and fascia.
Right.
6 years ago there was nothing.
No.
Now you have almost 10 high quality publications.
Right. What was his name again?
Wilke, W-I-L-K-E, Jan Wilke.
Oh, Wilke. Yep. Yeah. Forgive me for my German.
No, it's my German.
It's Guten Tag and Guten Morgen, and that's it. That's all. That's all I learn. I'm sorry. Before we, obviously, I'm mindful of your time, Robert, but I wanted to ask you a question because I know this plays back to clinicians and body workers, obviously. But is there anything that you often find body workers misrepresent or don't understand from a fascial point of view? Because I tend to in terms of myth busting certain theories. Fascial research has disproven I suppose old theories that you tend to still keep hearing over and over and saying, well, look, that's not actually true anymore. This is what we're looking at. I mean, I know you've explained it beautifully from the standpoint of obviously emotions and stress and hormones and all that sort of stuff. But is there anything that you still think body workers tend to misrepresent in their understanding of the fascial system and working with it?
Yeah, I see it more in North America, in the PT world. They are almost going into 2 militant camps, similar like the Republicans and the Democrats, who are communicating with each other very enthusiastically, but attacking the other group. And so you have the neuroscientists who are very evidence-oriented and who say it's all in the brain. And fascia does not matter at all. You forget about that. And they don't touch their clients almost anymore. And they focus all on active movement participation. And they call the esoteric people, the fascia people, to be esoteric lunatics and have no evidence behind it.
Go on.
And then on the other side, you have the people who have a warm heart, who are not able to read small print PDF research articles, but they usually have a better empathy with their clients. I'm exaggerating.
Yeah. I know you are. I understand your sarcasm. I can feel it.
Yeah. And most of my friends are on the second group. but I think they should be a little bit more rational in their analysis. If something works, it doesn't mean that the mechanisms explaining it is also true.
True.
And
yeah.
So in America, you have this split of the people who work with the nervous system and are more evidence-oriented, and the people who work with the tissue.
Yeah.
And I think that is a misunderstanding, because we have shown long ago, and actually the people from the neuroscientist group, that is funny, when they say you cannot stretch fascia. Fascia is so dense, forget about mechanical stimulation changing it. They quote a paper in which I contributed as an author.
Oh, really? Isn't that
Yeah.
funny? Because,
yeah.
I'm assuming you know Jan Dom Holt, don't you?
Yeah, sure. I love him.
Yeah. Jan. So, when I was in America presenting at a conference, he was the main speaker there, and he said the exact, when I spoke to him, he said the exact same thing. I mean, he has a following of the pain science people who try and I know, and they try and floor him. And he says, "Look, Stuart, they don't keep me up at night at all. I know what I do, and I know, I know my physiology. It's not a problem." But he says, "I just don't understand why they need to be so aggressive about their theories."
It's a social media phenomenon that we have otherwise, So you, in split seconds, you get something that supports what you already believe.
Correct.
And then you believe it stronger. Everybody reasonable knows that fascia cannot change,
Yeah.
And actually, in that paper, we only showed on a cadaver level.
Oh, really?
In a dead piece of tissue, you need more than 100 kilograms to have a sustaining, long-lasting deformation on the IT band, on the lumbar fascia. But we also showed in looser fascia, even on a cadaver level, you may be able to do a long-lasting deformation. And we also concluded in the paper, the tissue that you work with the client is not dead, that there are Ruffini receptors included. There are lots of sympathetic nerve endings. They can change the water content in a few seconds and make the tissue drier, harder, softer.
Pliable.
Golgi tendons can change the muscle tonus of the muscle fibers pulling on the IT band, and also make the IT band softer by the muscles pulling on it, relaxing on it. So we pointed all of that out. So maybe that is the main thing, that people think fascia is a mechanical tissue, and everybody who works with the brain should not think about fascia. So in a new calculation that Carla Stecker and I did together with a German scientist, we did a quantification of the sensory nerve endings in fascia. And we came to the incredible number of 250 million neurons. And of course, as a scientist, you don't claim that and say, I did my homework, trust me. Of course. But you need to do it in a transparent manner so that everybody can repeat your assumptions, your calculation method.
So it can be consistent.
And some people may say, no, it's 260 or 230 million, but that means it's our richest sensory organ altogether. Wow. Richer than the skin as a sensory organ, richer than our sense of seeing. And that means if you work with fascia, you are in the nervous system. And if you want to change the nervous system, including the autonomic nervous system and emotional patterns, talking, as I used to study at Heidelberg University in psychology, is an efficient method. Let's talk about your problem, Robert, what happened in your childhood. But touch and movement and fascial stimulation is so much more profound. So maybe that is the biggest misunderstanding, that there is a bridge between fascia and the richness of the nervous system.
I mean, if once you've worked as a body worker, you can't. There's no way you can turn your back on what effects that you do. I mean, and sometimes it's hard to quantify what it is you're actually doing and explain it, but you know innately that you do change tissue and that people move and feel better. There's no doubt about it. I mean, being touched just You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I think therapists alone, honestly, or body workers just don't get enough touch themselves. They give it, but they don't receive it a lot. That's an issue
But
I
that's a
have.
mistake. So you should put that on your tax bill. Every week you get a high quality sessions, or you disguise. So you say, I'm a scientist at university. You don't tell them that you're a colleague. No. And you go to all these people and pretend to have low back pain and get treatment because you learn so much.
I know. Well, unfortunately, as you well know, because you've lived that body worker world, you know, they're so much givers and not much takers. So they just, for whatever reasons, you know, it's therapeutic just to lie on the table alone, Robert. Yeah. Let alone just receive treatment. So when are you here again? You're Sydney, Melbourne.
End of October. I'm very much looking forward to be in Sydney again.
Yep. Well, I'm born in Sydney, but I live in Melbourne. You go on.
Oh, great. Yeah. So Budiman Minasin with his Terra Rosa network.
Buddy.
He invited me to do a 2-day workshop on working with scars and adhesions.
Beautiful.
From a perspective. So we're using tool-assisted work and make the difference between fibrosis and densification. That is a new concept. In one of them, it's more the collagen fibers that are changed. In the others, it's more the water binding and the hyaluronan associated viscosity in the ground substance. And we have different techniques.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yep. Are you doing the same one in Melbourne, Robert, or are you doing?
No, I do the 2 days and 1-day workshop in Sydney. And then I fly to Melbourne for the big low back pain Congress.
Right. Okay. So it's Sydney that you're actually doing the workshop, but the
workshop I do in Sydney also.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's terrific. I just wanted to and so obviously when people are going along to the workshop 2 days, there's a lot of material to get through there.
So 2 days fascia and manual therapy. With tool assisted, but also with your hands. With scars and adhesions, and that includes chronic low back pain, because we have shown with ultrasound. I will bring my ultrasound with me, where you can have small. There it is. So you can have an ultrasound head, and you put it on your smartphone, and then you can see how adhered or not is your
tissue
epimysium around the sternocleido or the lumbar fascia.
Really?
So that will be part of the adhesion and scar workshop.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So real changes.
So now you have these tools and you can look at it at your smartphone.
Yeah, I know. You wouldn't have done that 20 years ago, Robert.
So that would be nice, And then I'll do 1 day on fascia and the autonomic nervous system linked with emotions and immune regulation. And that's my more recent hobby and research.
So focus. Is that your new passion, Robert?
Yeah, the new passion,
Because I wanted to know what your new passion was.
I was already doing 5 years ago. But now the link going back to my psychology background is more in the last 1.5 years.
Wow. You might
have started with a depression study.
So
in the depression study, we found out the fascia is not only stiffer, but it's also has more dampening. That is hard to explain. Normally, if you have a tissue and you make it stiffer, it has more recoil capacity. For example, let me see. There we have. If you have a rubber band, and if it's thicker and stiffer, and if you deform it, it bounces back quickly. And that is measured as elastic recoil capacity. If you have the same material and it's less stiff, then it doesn't bounce so quickly. So you can measure the dampening or the recoil capacity. They are the same property, basically. And I would have assumed if a tissue is stiffer, it has less dampening. But in these depressive patients, it's stiffer, but it's more dampening as opposed to healthy people. You may know it. If you push in a healthy tissue and take your finger out, the tissue comes back in milliseconds.
Yes.
And on the pathological side, it takes a second or two to come back.
Wow.
So we can measure the elastic recall capacity with the stool. And that is the new finding now. So how come they are stiffer, but the stiffness is not an elastic one? It's so a dampening. And then that's where my friends from Heidelberg University call me now, after we published that. And they say, Robert Schleip, I remember you. So we did primal scream and verse drugs together.
Primal scream.
And they come with Wilhelm Reich and his character types. Wow. And I'm scratching my head because Wilhelm Reich described a body armor where people are very fragile underneath, deep inside, in order to cope. One strategy, and that is for him the depressive or masochistic body type. You develop a hard shell in order to dampen impulses on you.
Wow.
So now we are examining whether Wilhelm Reich may be partly right, but we don't know. So whether I have another friend, he says, Robert, forget about your Wilhelm Reich. You know, this is last century.
Really?
It's all the inflammatory cytokines, and it could be both.
But you've got to explore both.
Yeah. So probably the inflammatory cytokines are involved in many things, including the stiffness change in depression. But then the question is, who instructs the biochemical milieu? And it may be the sympathetic chronic activation. Right. So then you may have both. Yeah. So the inflammatory changes, they change the water binding in the ground substance. So you have less water and more free, more edema-like water.
Yeah.
So that is one of the new developments where I'm looking forward to learn at the Melbourne Congress. We now have an MRI technology to look not how much water you have, but whether you have healthy water or unhealthy water. For example, in tennis elbow.
Yes.
So there you have more unbound water. So it's more like in an acidic condition.
Yep.
And you have a different hyaluronan, a more sticky hyaluronan, not so much a liquid one.
Yep. This is when it's pathological, is that right, Robert?
Yeah. Yep. So you can. So in MRI there is a new technology. The radiologist doesn't need to buy new machines. They only include a new software. And then they
can pick that up.
Fascial diagnosis,
Really?
So so it's called T1 row MRI imaging. It's fairly new.
That would
be
in
the
massive.
Future, a fascia therapist who tries to palpate viscosity and elasticity and water binding, they have to interact with the radiologist. And if somebody has low back pain, they will do the MRI more frequently than is healthy, of course, to make money.
Yes.
And to tell their surgeries, which are often unnecessary. But the same technology can be used to say, do you know a good fascia therapist in your community?
Really?
Who is willing to communicate with us? Where we give this guy or this woman 3 weeks time to change with the water binding, and then we will examine again whether we continue in that direction.
So would that be something that you would see with most overused tendon injuries, Robert? Would you see potentially that type of change in and around that area?
Antonio Stecco showed it in epicondylitis here. Jan Wilke has shown partly it in delayed onset muscle soreness.
Yep.
And some people are now exploring it and having robust indication, but we need a little bit more research to be totally sure in plantar fasciosis.
You know, that would be massive, Robert, in sports medicine world.
Yeah.
You do realize that would be massive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Also,
that would
Achilles
be
tendinosis, but there is a.
Yep.
So I'm now going, and I will meet Jan Wilke there the next week to the biggest European sports conference in Paris.
Yep.
And already they have a major session on the role of connective tissues in sports medicine.
Yeah.
Whenever you go on a big sports conference, it's not yet in a plenary session, but in the afternoons when you split the audience into 3-4 parallel groups, there is now almost always
a discussion,
2 or 3 hour session. What is the role of collagen connective tissues in Achilles tendinosis? In plantar fasciosis, in runner's knee, etc. Jan Wilke showed that the majority of sports-related strain injuries, and that's a lot.
Please. I'm all ears. Tell me.
Yeah, is not torn muscle fibers. That is only the case in 13.5%. In the overwhelming majority, it's intramuscular connective tissue, perimysium or endomysium, or the tendinous transition. So it's the collagen tissue, not the sarcomeres, who is the weakest link and the most fragile element in our athletes, how we prepare them, how they do muscle strengthening, etc. So it's a big focus now. If that's the weakest link, if that's where more than 85% of the strain injuries happening, we need to learn how can we train the fascial tissues to adapt more powerfully to the growing muscle forces that young adolescents have each year. Yeah.
It's, it's interesting. I did a webinar last night for some therapists on intramuscular central tendon hamstring injuries, which is something we're seeing a lot now. It's, and I mean, it goes under the radar, Robert. Like, we're seeing it more and more. And one of my last clients last night was an orthopedic surgeon. I was talking to him about it, and he was going, we see proximal hamstring tendon avulsions, but if we look further in MRI, we start to see this wavy appearance under there of edema at that intramuscular tendon. And it goes, and especially with athletes who have recurring hamstring injuries, Robert.
Which is so frequent,
it's the number one injury for, AFL athletes here and rugby and all that sort of stuff. It's huge, like it's a big deal, but we're only now understanding that.
But it's usually not the muscle fibers that are torn. It's the intramuscular connective tissue, and we are learning what it is, whether it's the perimysium.
Wow, isn't that interesting? Because the orthopedic surgeons are saying the same sort of thing. It's when they go in to repair it. Those the tendons are basically just a stabilizing strut, the biceps femoris, and they just see that obviously that appearance on like this wavy appearance, if you like, of the connections into that area. And he says obviously, I mean, all the rehab in the world doesn't fix it, unfortunately, at this stage. Probably because we don't understand it that well. But geez, that's huge, Robert.
It's
sitting on a gold mine there.
And I'm very much looking forward because that is another one. The complementary therapists, the osteopaths, manual therapy, they have been they developed a rich wisdom repertoire and knowledge on how to work with tissues. But they haven't communicated with the evidence-based scientists so much. And in sports, they are meeting each other, and I like that.
Well, obviously that'll be communication, such a big part, isn't it? I mean, just sharing the message in a beautiful way.
But the big problem is we are speaking so different languages.
Well, you would have had to gone through that yourself, going from a body worker into research and understanding everything that comes up. I know, I can tell. Like you're extraordinarily passionate and happy, and you've got a great head of hair, and it's you're a happy man. I mean, I know it's the 3 coffees you've had this morning, but wow, you can definitely feel the passion. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But you'll
so maybe that's what we non-scientists or the clinicians can learn, because many clinicians, if they have practiced more than 20, 30 years, they get into this comfortable attitude. I knew that all along. Robert, what you find out there with your excitement, I have been teaching that 30 years, and they're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they lose the spirit of awe and discovery.
Yes. Yes.
So if a new study comes out and 80% of that was something that they had predicted, I get excited about the 20%, where they found something different.
I
but
share.
They say, I knew most of it. This is boring. So I think it's much better to learn from the scientists, where you know, where you come from the attitude, we know nothing. And the more you do research,
I know nothing.
So you become like a discovering child.
Yeah.
And every study, every client is a great jungle to explore and to learn from them.
Yeah, wow. I mean, gee whiz. Look, I feel the same way. I've been doing this 32 years, but, if I thought that I knew everything, I would give up tomorrow, honestly, because everybody is a new experience, and, research, I absolutely adore it. How is it going to apply to me as a clinician, and what I do and what I understand, and even what I tell my clients as well, like their ability to understand what happens with their body as well. But I mean, if you thought you knew everything, you might as well, move on, find something else passionate. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, exactly. It's it's incredible, isn't it? I'm mindful of your time, Robert. I know you've got a full day ahead of you. I'm not sure what you do. Is it Thursday or Friday for you? No, it's Thursday.
It's Thursday.
Yeah, it's Thursday. Yeah, it's start of Thursday. Yeah. You're behind us. That's right. I forgot that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining me, Robert. Obviously, I'll be sharing this with the my network and social situation. See if we can't expand the love and the passion and the knowledge, which is what we're all about. And, I hopefully look forward to catching up with you. I'll chase those research. I'd love to catch up with you at some stage if you're in Melbourne. I'm not sure. I'm actually up in Sydney in October, so I may be able to catch you for the workshop there, if not. Yep. But I'm definitely in Melbourne, so I'd love to reach out and catch up. That'd be fantastic.
Thank you very much. This is very inspiring. I look forward to.
You were inspiring. I don't know what I was. I was just asking the questions, Robert. So how do we say goodbye in German?
Auf Wiedersehen.
It is Auf Wiedersehen, because I keep there. It's au revoir French, isn't it?
Yeah. So I usually sign off with fascinatedly yours.
I did. The
name fascia.
Yeah,
but it has the spirit of fascination. The people in the fascia community, depending on your inclination, you describe yourself as a fascinado or fascinata if you're female.
I did notice that on your emails. I thought, is that a play on fascia? Because I'm like,
sure, it is.
And so it was.
Both of these terms, fascination and fascia, have the same Latin root, which means to bind. So fascia binds tissues together, and fascination binds your curiosity and attention. So I think they have a common.
That's beautiful. Root. That's beautiful sentiments, and it explains it perfectly, doesn't it? All right, Navita saying, Robert, thank you so much for joining us. I can't thank you enough. And look, I'll definitely be in touch. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you.